Hi, my name's Amanda Easton. I'm a performer, singer-songwriter from Sydney, Australia. I make retro-inspired, theatrical, electronic pop. But when I'm not doing my own music, I do
cabaret,
cover band gigs, solo gigs, tribute shows, recording sessions. Welcome to my Circle of Life vlog.
And I'll be watching you from here.
Welcome to my vlog. I'm pretty sure I'm up to vlog number 8. Has anybody seen the finale of Orange is the New Black, as in the whole series finale? Oh my goodness, I watched it last night, and apart from the fact that that episode was amazing, the whole series is just, oh my goodness, harrowing but kind of uplifting at times, and it just really makes you appreciate your own life. Especially since I just come from a dinner with friends and had a lovely time. It was one of my friends' birthdays, and hung out with some family and ate some great food and, you know, appreciated the beautiful people that are around me. And then I see the way some people's lives can be. Yes, and it was really interesting. The episode had a slightly different theme song than it normally does. It's normally Regina Spektor's You've Got Time, and it was still that song, but it was in like an orchestral mix. The epicity, and I know that's not a real word, but it should be. Oh my goodness, it just, you knew that you were in for something really special. Sure, it's the last episode of the season anyway, but wow, just so interesting that they chose to do a different version just for that one episode, and it just reminds you of how much music can move you. Anyway, the last few weeks I've been really busy. This week not so much, but before that, and I've got to say I really felt the pressure. It was a matter of also a lack of confidence. I did a few gigs that, you know, sorry, Smokey, that's my cat. I did a few gigs that were really important to me, and so, you know, I put the pressure on myself. One of them was a gig at the Enmore Theatre, and the Enmore Theatre is a place that I've gone to see a lot of international acts that I love, so it was important from that point of view, but also because it was a tribute concert to my dear departed friend, Damien Lovelock, and I ended up doing some songs, you know, with the Celibate Rifles, which are a legendary punk band, and I guess I was worried that Celibate Rifles fans would be standing there going, who's this chick think she is, you know, singing in front of a punk band. And I can't say that punk is my natural genre, but I had the time of my life and I felt like it went well. So, you know, it's like that thing that they say, you know, you put enough pressure on something, that's how you get a diamond. I mean, I've really stuffed up the saying there, but you know what I mean. You work really hard and the pressure seems intense, but you end up with something that, you know, you're happy with. And I also did the Manly Jazz Festival Earth, Wind and Fire show, which was pretty last minute. So, you know, the pressure was on there, and of course they happened at the same time, as well as another brand new show that I was learning. And, you know, I'm not complaining. I'm so happy to be doing all these different projects. I just kind of wish they didn't all happen at the same time, but that's okay. Another project that's coming up that isn't last minute and is going to be really exciting and features a lot of the same lineup as the Earth, Wind and Fire show, is a Nile Rodgers show, which is called Le Freak, and it's also being run by House of Soul, who also are the producers behind the Earth, Wind and Fire show. And you probably already know a whole lot of Nile Rodgers songs, even if you didn't think you did. I mean, there's stuff that he's been involved in, from Tina Turner to Tina Arena to Sister Sledge, to Daft Punk, to David Bowie. It's such an extreme mix of stuff. Always, you know, has that Nile Rodgers feel though. And it's usually really fun, party, interesting stuff. So I'm so excited to be involved in that. And I think our first gig will be around December, so keep an eye out for that if you want to come along. So, you know, most times I do a segment of my vlog that is called Stage Stories, and I interview somebody that I work with. And the one that's coming up for this week, and it'll be uploaded here on Facebook as well as on YouTube by Friday. That's tomorrow. Tomorrow. And this time I interviewed John Spence, who's a guitarist, but is really interesting because there's always been this argument about business versus artistry. And I've had people tell me, oh, you know, you're kind of good at the business part of the music. Maybe you should be a music manager. And apart from the fact that's just not what I want to do, I actually think that those business skills are something that an artist should have. They kind of have to in today's world. I mean, even if you have a separate person to do your management and your record company stuff, and not many people do nowadays, but even if you had all of that, shouldn't you kind of know what they do so that, you know, they're doing the right thing for you? So I'm a firm believer in artists, even if it doesn't come naturally to them, should really try and understand the business. And if you watch this interview with John Spence, you'll see that he's totally that person. He's definitely a great artist and musician, but he was aware from the beginning that to understand the business thing had a lot of advantages. Now, you would know a lot of the people he's worked with, probably particularly the Wiggles, and he's the guy that took the Wiggles from, you know, a small kids act into a pretty massively successful kids act, and he's done it in a really interesting way. He's definitely, and that's not all he's done, but that's just something that you would know of. And he's that guy that just, you know, he's a music entrepreneur and has some really good ideas. So I'd love you to have a listen to the interview and, you know, maybe be inspired by that. Anyway, what's going on this weekend? I've already had a gig this week, a cabaret gig, but this Friday I'm doing, you know, a show that I love. You know, I went and dyed my hair for it. It's the Blondie versus Pretenders show, and that's at Canterbury Holston Park RSL, which is just around the corner from where I live. So I'd love you to come along to that. Saturday night I'm a bit further out at Picton with the Fleetwood Mac show, the Rumours show. And on Sunday afternoon about 4 o'clock, we're at the Marrickville Festival with the Earth, Wind and Fire show that we did at Manly Jazz Festival a week ago. So, you know, if I see you at any of the shows, come and say hello, and I would love that.
Truth will show when you stand so close, eye to eye.
So here I am at Long Reef Golf Club. Isn't this divine? This is definitely a gig with a view. And tonight I'm working with the Classic Kings. We're doing a 70s rock show, and I'm going to have a talk to John Spence, who runs our band and is the guitarist in the band. I first met him when I was doing a gig with him at Taronga Zoo, and his arm was in a sling, but he's a guitarist. Anyway, since I've got to know him, he's got a really interesting background. Okay, let me give you an interesting background. There you go. He's got a really interesting background. He worked with the Wiggles. I'm sure you'll know that multi-trillion-dollar kids act, and an indie band called the Fargone Beauties that had a lot of success too. And he runs a really successful prestige guitar business and does lots of things. So I'm looking forward to having a sit down with him and seeing what he has to say. He's also done some great stuff in TV, and yeah, anyway, we will find out soon. They're just setting up now. Let's see how they're going. Okay, I have John Spence in the hot seat.
Uh-oh.
Okay, John.
Yeah.
I met you at Taronga Zoo.
Wow.
We were doing the Doobie Brothers show, and you had a broken arm.
Yeah, broken wrist.
A broken wrist.
You're
You were
right.
still managing to play the guitar.
No, I wasn't.
You weren't.
No, not at that stage. That was a show we did with Barry Leaf. It
Yes.
was a 9-piece band, possibly one of the best bands anyone would ever play with. certainly
Amazing.
was.
We've got some of the members here
Yeah,
tonight as well.
correct. And
Yeah.
you were doing backing vocals.
I was.
And you were about 9.5 months pregnant.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, and you were standing next to me. I actually was in the show just doing backing vocals with the girls.
That's right, yeah.
But when I turned to the right, all I saw was actually your very
Big
big tummy.
belly.
It's great.
Named Joey now.
Correct. We've met Joey.
And were you worried that I was about to drop? Because I think the audience were a little bit,
Not
well,
at all.
that
I
girl
thought-
looks really pregnant.
No, you were very. But and as I recall it, you came in to fill in for Kim Hart.
I did.
couldn't quite make it. Kim knew the show, you didn't. You just walked in
Yeah.
and did it. It was pretty cool. So,
It was
yeah,
a fun night.
It was.
But so that's how I met you, and then we ended up doing this show together, which
Yes.
is Classic Kings Rocking the 70s, and
Yes.
we've been all over the place. The cruise, everything has been great fun. There goes my baby. He knows how to rock and roll. He drives me crazy. He gets me hot and cold fever. I know that you have a prestige guitar business,
Yep.
selling business, and you have other tribute bands. I know that you were in a very popular band in Australia called the Fargone Beauties.
Sorry,
and
say
I'm-
quickly. No, don't.
Oh, is it something rude?
Yeah,
oh.
look at that.
Oh,
Fargone
I
Beauties.
didn't know. Is that where the name came
That's
from?
where it came from.
Well, let's start there. Tell me about that band.
Okay, the Fargone Beauties, if you say it quickly, you'll get it. Yes, there was an accidental band. It was a great fun accidental band that actually had quite a lot of success accidentally. How did it come about? So I was, I've been a good mate of Tommy Emanuel's and Tommy and Phil for 30 plus years. Tommy and Phil were doing a show at the Harbourside Brasserie in Sydney.
I do remember
Long gone
it.
great venue.
Yeah.
Down the harbour. Tommy rang up one morning on like a Wednesday or something and said, just found out, Phil and I don't go on stage till 11 o'clock. We need a support act. Can you throw something together?
That happens only in the movies.
Correct. And it's tonight and tomorrow night. They said, oh, yeah, sure, fine. So, I'll see you there. So I rang up James Gillard, well-known bass player, singer, vocalist, great guitar player as well, multi-talented musician who just moved up from Melbourne, having come out of Mondo Rock
Ah,
and
yes.
later on Broderick Smith's band. And he'd relocated with his family to Sydney, and he was literally 2 suburbs away from me, and he made contact and said, I'm looking for work, anything, I'm up for it. So
There you go. He's anything
Correct.
today, now.
how about today, James? And he said, okay, let's go, what'll we do? I said, we're going to just do a couple of acoustic guitars, I know we can sing well together, and we'll just do a whole bunch of Neil Young and that kind of stuff. We'll just wing it, we'll just whatever. So we went in and played for that, and we played like an hour or something or other before Tommy and Phil, and went over really well. Tommy came up after our set and said, that was actually really good, but let's do a band tomorrow night.
No.
I'll play drums. And we went,
Tommy Emanuel played
Oh,
drums.
Tommy is one of the best drummers in the world.
That's not fair.
No, I know. So Tommy had been playing guitar since he was a little kid, but he was always passionate about drums. He had also,
know that.
we played together for a while in a band called Gold Rush, and Gold Rush was a kind of like a really great slick country rock band doing everything from Burrito Brothers to Doobie Brothers to, they were a great band, lots of originals. Phil was the guitar player. Tommy came and played drums with that band for 6 months, and he was unbelievably great drummer. Tommy said at the Harbourside Brasserie, let's put a band together. I'll play drums. Do you want to bring anybody else in? So I went, yeah, leave it with me. So I rang up another mate who I'd got to know a bit, and his name is Terry Murray. So Terry's a big, tall, pommy bloke from Brixton or somewhere like that. He'd been working with Doug Parkinson, Marsha Hines and all the rest of it, and he was between gigs, and same story, lives down the road.
Yeah.
So I thought, I just
Where
need
do you live? This is a magic place.
Northern Beaches.
Yeah, right.
Northern Beaches of Sydney.
Where we are now.
Exactly,
So beautiful.
up the road.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you want to live here?
Correct. And it was just, again, because Terry was just keen to play. We'd done a few little things together. He was literally around the corner, so we thought, okay, so we went round to James's house and threw together a quick rehearsal, got in the car, went to the gig. James is playing bass because that's his natural calling, one of. I'm playing a bit of guitar. Terry's a great guitar player, and everyone sings.
Yeah,
So
that's what makes it.
exactly. So we just we did like an hour set or something rather. Then Phil came up and played guitar and went another half an hour, and it was just a great put together, great jam band, and
Yeah.
everyone loved it. And an agent came up to us after when we were getting our gear off stage and said, "Is this a band?" And we said, "Well, it could be."
Now it is.
And he said, and we said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, I'm an agent from so and so. I can get you guys work tomorrow if you want to work. I booked these 10 venues or whatever else." And Tommy said, I've got some recording with Dragon in 3 weeks' time. I'm in Sydney. I'll play drums, but I won't play any guitar. But I'm here for 3 weeks." And we went, "Okay." The agent said, "What's the band called?" And James turned around like that, like he'd been saving it up for a decade, and said, "The Fargone Beauties." And he went, "What?" "Fargone Beauties. Say it quickly." I went, "Okay, looks like there's a band."
That's amazing.
10 days later, we actually started, playing that gig circuit in Sydney. We played, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, Sunday afternoons, all over Sydney for about a year, maybe, and probably 2 years, I think. Anyway, after it maybe wasn't that long, but it maybe sometime into 6 months or so, we had to change drummers after Tommy had to leave. So Doug Bly, the original drummer from Gold Rush, came in and played. And so it was kind of 3/4 of a country band. It was kind of, we didn't quite know where it was heading. We're just doing covers. And we start with Terry Murray, I'm sure it was Terry, brought in this idea of saying, "Why don't we do Wild Thing like a country song?" And we went, "Look, like, how does that work?" And he said, "Okay, like this." And it was like 2/4, fast bluegrass, Wild Thing. And we played it, and it was hilarious.
Yeah.
No, we barely stopped laughing. And
the audiences?
Well, we sort of snuck it into the set somewhere. So we were just going out doing covers, rock covers and stuff. And then one week we had, I think we had that and Hey Joe. So we had Wild Thing by the Trogs, we had Hey Joe by Jimi Hendrix, done in loud electric bluegrass style, which we then termed thrashgrass. That went over a treat.
Yeah.
It was hilariously good fun. So we found ourselves suddenly being offered some studio time from a local studio owner. This all happened in the space of a few months. And so we went and recorded a bunch of these thrashgrass songs and some old R&B covers done in bluegrass style. 3-part harmony, and it was all done with minimal rehearsal, pretty much live. And we made a cassette to sell. Just a cheapie. We couldn't afford to do a record back in those days. It was way before CD. It was we're talking like late 80s. So we did a bunch of cassettes to shop around, like demos and stuff. Terry Murray, the guitar player, was working with Doug Mulray occasionally.
Yeah, on Triple M.
On Triple M.
He was the big guy too.
And Doug was the big guy in radio in Sydney. He had the biggest audience and all the rest of it. Terry played in the tape, and Doug thought it was fantastic. He just loved it, and he put it straight to air. He put Wild Thing and Hey Joe straight to air on, Tuesday morning or something or other, and like the phone didn't stop ringing. So.
But if you'd planned all of this.
No, you couldn't plan it. You couldn't plan it. And so all of a sudden, now we're doing bigger gigs, we're doing festivals, and it was like, hello, accidental band.
How amazing! How did it end up?
We did that for 3 years, I think. I, at the time, was doing a pretty heavy-duty day job. I was actually managing the Wiggles.
Yes, well, I was going to ask you about that.
And the
you
Wiggles,
were doing that at the same time.
Exactly. So this is now the...
But not one career at a time, just to throw them all
just
together.
to crowd it all together.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest, that was a full-on enterprise. So those guys, when they started, we started doing little shows in kindergartens for $300 and, little things here and there.
So you were with them from the beginning?
Yeah, well, not quite the very, very beginning, but with that lineup, doing, there used to be a fifth Wiggle, and they had done some other shows, but when they got serious and went full time, they'd recorded an album, 2 albums for ABC, and they said we needed management. I'd been working with them doing a whole lot of other shows for ABC, where they were just using the ABC platform as a showcase for their recorded kids artists. So I got to know them, and we kicked it off really well. I just decided to say, okay, I think I can do this. I really believe in what they were doing. So the Wiggles thing, I was like a year into the Wiggles thing while the Fargones were going great. And to be quite honest, I actually didn't have time and I had to leave. So I actually walked away from the band all happily. They replaced me with a couple of guys over a period of years. We actually did get back together in 2006 for the Gympie Muster. So we played.
Nice.
the Fargones played the Gympie Muster about 5 times. It was terrific. It was,
Yeah.
you know, big audiences, and
Yeah.
it all was just fun. And it was, you know, we got paid to have fun. It was terrific. And so in 2006, we actually put the band back together, did some rehearsals, and went up and played to 20,000 people.
How nice. Is that likely to happen again, do you
That
think?
was the last gig we've ever done.
Yeah.
That was we kind of did it and lived through it, and went, that's
Yeah.
probably everything.
Well, it's hard to kind of beat that probably,
it
so
was
it's a good way
amazing.
to give it a
finish,
tick.
give it a tick.
Yeah.
Great fun.
So in the meantime, the Wiggles are taking off, well,
Yeah.
eventually.
Let's dance, everybody!
Dorothy, Dorothy, would you like to dance with me?
Love to!
Dorothy, Dorothy, would you like to dance with me? First you take your hands.
Yep. No, they did.
Yeah.
They were just going from strength to strength. Wherever he played, they just had accolades everywhere. The one key moment was that I had previously worked at Channel 9 in music production on Tonight shows, etc., and so I had some contacts there. And when the Wiggles were really making some big noise out there in the live arena, we knew we had to kick it into the next level. So I actually called a producer friend who was then working with Ray Martin on what was the show then back in the day, and it was the 7:30 show on Channel 9.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Current Affair. There we go.
Uh-huh.
Yep. And they said, yeah, well, let's do a story. So they did a story on the Wiggles, and they brought a camera crew out and shot a day with the Wiggles at the Hills Centre, you know,
Yeah.
a big theatre there, with 3 audiences coming in on, and they walked away. They produced a great, probably about a 5-minute, maybe 7-minute little segment on the Wiggles, and again, the same story. The phone just started ringing and never stopped. It just went on. So.
Was that your first experience in management, in band management, or you
apart from
managing
my own
the
bands,
Fargone
yeah,
Beauties
apart from my own
themselves?
bands things, but
Yeah.
yes, certainly managing a third party. But
Yeah.
it was a really good experience, and you know, it worked really well for about 5 years or so, and then we sort of actually went out of separate ways. It's
Yeah.
another whole story. They did a big deal in America.
Yeah.
They needed other representation, and so it went on. You know, no regrets. Everybody had a good time.
So how different was it managing and being in your own thrash
grass.
Let's call it rock.
Yeah.
But you know, it's the rock kind of side of the
Yeah,
industry compared to being in a kids act. I mean, it's got to be different.
Well, totally different. We actually, with the Wiggles, kind of sort of rewrote the rules on how to present children's entertainment in this country. So up till that time, pretty much John Spencer from Play School and the Play School show itself pretty much had that live kids concert market sewn up. They were going around the country doing great shows, a great business, and they were doing really well, and terrific shows and all the rest of it. What we did was tried to plug into a bit of that same audience, but what we decided to do is, rather than find a local promoter out in Orange or Mudgee or whatever else, we actually contacted daycare centres, the Nursing Mothers Associations, P&Cs, school organisations. We found parents groups, mainly mums, who needed to do fundraisers, and we taught them how to be promoters. So we sent them a Wiggles promotion pack. So we taught them how to do it, said, here, this is what you do. You go and find a venue. Here's a bunch of posters. Here are all the printed numbered tickets. Here's the ticket price. Here's how you be a promoter. And by the way, you have to get some radio time. You need to get some stuff in the newspapers. And we taught them how to do this. And we did it for 3 years.
That's amazing. How fantastic. And everybody benefited. They benefited as
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
did the Wiggles,
We gave a
And you-
fair chunk of the proceedings to the charity, the organisers. And it just kept going bigger and bigger until, you know, eventually we're doing theatres and it's all getting
Had to
pretty
go
crazy.
worldwide,
And it had to
yeah.
go overseas.
Yeah. So how do a bunch of guys, because there was no girl in the Wiggles back
No,
in those
yeah.
days, how did a bunch of guys, after doing a kids show, relax? Because I'm sure they relax differently. Or do they to the Fargone Beauties that were out on the road? I mean, you might have been talking afternoons rather than 2 o'clock in the morning.
Pretty much correct. No, it was, the whole thing is the Wiggles guys who were such, you know, easygoing, straight guys.
Yeah.
There were always, I mean, there were 3 teachers there, and Jeff Fatnam, you know, lifelong musician.
Yeah.
And so that they had the kids' best interests at heart. There's no damage done backstage with the Wiggles. I can tell you, never was. Anyway.
Yeah. Oh, nice to hear.
Easy.
So you said earlier, and it was probably partly a joke, that you've had 17 careers.
Oh, yeah.
They're the ones that I know about. Any other, out of the 17, what are other highlights?
Highlights was working at Channel 9. So I, coming out of playing in bands and everything, I knew, I'd got pretty much hit my late 20s. I'd moved back to Sydney. We were living on the North Coast, playing in bands, having fun. Needed to get a bit serious and thought, need a day job.
Yeah.
What could,
Because marriage and kids were on the horizon?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Quite married for a while, into mortgages, got 2 children, got to pay the bills.
Yes.
Pretty hard to do. We're talking back in the early 80s here, and even back then it was hard to make a living as a musician, even if you were working a lot.
Right.
It was pretty, line ball back then. So I kind of made a decision that not to try and to rely on playing live to make a living. I always wanted to keep playing live, and luckily have done so, but it was never going to. I didn't want to rely on it to pay the mortgage, etc. So a friend of mine a friend of mine's wife was actually working as a segment producer on the Today Show at Channel 9. And he was actually a musician friend, and so we'd played bands together, and Penny would just talk about her day job, and it sounded like too much fun.
Yeah.
So you've got to be kidding me, working, television, doing live crosses and doing all that sort of stuff. And I said, wouldn't it, to myself, I thought, if I could find a way to combine some experience in music and working in television, well, that'd be the ideal job. So I actually spent a year hunting that down, so doing odd jobs and other things, and still playing in bands. I actually did almost a year pro bono free work for some television productions, including some Channel 9 stuff, where I was quite clearly saying, I need experience, I need to know how to do this stuff.
Right.
And I'm looking for a job at the end of the day, somewhere down the track.
And you weren't 15, because a lot of people coming straight out of school do that kind of thing. They're encouraged to do it. Sometimes
20s.
Resent doing it.
Yep.
But yet you're in your late 20s, but you had a vision to do something specific, and you knew you had to build up some kind of experience and networks, no doubt, as well.
And that's
Contacts.
precisely, it really is who you know. So in the end of the day, after doing all that pro bono work, I did have a group of people who knew me, and I'd actually done work with these people. And eventually the word filtered through that the Mike Walsh show, which was a very, very big daytime variety show, had moved from Channel 10 to Channel 9, had gone even better, at Channel 9. But then it was going to nighttime the following year. Nighttime variety shows is big budget land television. So we're talking 1985, very expensive live to air TV, big budget. Mr. Packer was all in.
Yeah.
Mike Walsh was the blue. Yeah, what am I saying? He was the man. He had the audience and was going to bring them into nighttime. So I found out that they needed a talent coordinator who was the person that actually books all the live music acts on the show. And I thought, well, that's my dream job straight away. So I ended up going to the cottage. I couldn't get anyone to take a phone call. I went to the production cottage, which is a little house next door to Channel 9's building, and I just walked in and sat down on the lounge and explained to the receptionist that I was looking to speak to a senior producer about the talent coordinator's job, and I have all day, and I'm quite happy to wait. And so I waited and I waited and I waited, and all the producers came out and said, "Who are you? What do you want?" And I said, "Same story."
I'm the talent coordinator, can't you tell?
Finally, about 2 o'clock, a senior producer came out, and the guy was actually my age, but he was a young gun, bright producer who'd been working with Walsh and 9 for some years. And anyway, so literally we walked out to the garden, and he didn't talk about television at all. We just talked about stuff, about life, and living and playing in bands, and just fun stuff. Anyway, next thing you know, I got a phone call saying, "Come in, Mike Walsh wants to meet you." Came into a pretty heavy-duty meeting with all the senior producing staff, and I just said, "Who have I got to kill to get this job?" And I got it. And that was great fun. But that was the year that Mike Walsh actually imploded, unfortunately, with the big budget TV show. It didn't work. Oh. So the expectation was so high.
Right.
For various reasons, it was never met, and that show didn't quite last the year. So we're talking big budget stuff here. We were doing, massive things. There was like dancers and a 30-piece band. It was just like insane.
We need that again.
Back in the day, it was actually a great show.
Yeah.
But they couldn't sustain the production values to actually to remain competitive. The audiences were dwindling, all the rest of it. And Mr. Packer had a very serious interest in cricket around that time, if you remember. And the Ashes test was on, and he said to Mr. Walsh, "Time to go.
Need your time slot,
Yeah,
mate.
need your time slot. We're going to put on the Ashes from England." So we all walked in.
Australia and
We all
sport.
walked in. This is the first thing you learn about television. Nothing is secure.
Yeah.
And so after 9 months, we got a call. We had a production meeting at 2 o'clock on a Monday afternoon. Ooh, very weird. Something's not right. And all of a sudden they said, "Tonight's the last show." But I came back later and did a couple of years with Ray Martin on the Midday Show.
Yep.
Same job, fantastic.
Which is how you met people like Rex Go,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. Rex was in the band.
Yeah.
Along with Jeff Harvey, band leader, had the best players in Sydney.
Yeah.
And on a rotating basis, he had 3 different bands that rotated around week by week. So there were 30 musicians, all of whom were the best guys in Sydney, and it was absolute delight. I used to sit with the technical crew in rehearsals every day, thinking, we'd say out loud, "This is the best place to be in the world." You know, we're on the floor, we're doing live television. There's Joni Mitchell.
Oh my
You know,
goodness.
working with our band.
Yeah,
Are you
how
kidding
fantastic.
me? There's
Yeah.
stuff like that going on. Tony Bennett.
Yeah.
Just going.
Wow.
So everybody who was touring in Australia in those years did the Midday
that show. And it was always live.
Always 100% live.
So there had to be fuck ups. Can you
You
tell
know
me
what?
about
I've
one
got
of
to
those?
say,
Two of
this
those?
is a crazy, absolute mad thing. Then in 3.5 years of television that I did live to air stuff at 9, there was never one, not even a technical,
That's amazing.
not one mistake.
Yeah, even from the artists themselves, because I'm
No.
thinking that's more likely where it's going to
No,
come
we've
from.
seen
rather
some
than
absolute
guys.
bloopers, and,
Yeah.
we've seen some meltdowns and some mistakes where people think they weren't live.
Yes.
But this was such a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
It was the best floor crew in the country, possibly in the world, and I don't say it lightly because the American acts would come in, and first of all, my job as the talent coordinator is that I would be calling the promoter, or sometimes they'd be calling me, and at some point in the conversation say, "Yeah, we'd love to have Tom Jones on, but it's 100% live."
Yeah.
And he said, "No, Tom doesn't sing live on television." Well, sorry,
What?
that's our policy.
Surely not.
I don't know, I'm just making it up. It's
Okay,
just an
but some
example.
people say
Some
that.
people say
Yeah.
that. Most of the Americans would say that.
Really?
Oh yeah, and they're certainly not going to play with a live band that they've never met. That they would maybe concede to doing a live vocal to a backing track, but we're saying no. Sorry,
Right.
our policy is 100% live. So
Yeah.
we've got a live band. We do this every day.
No rehearsal? Or you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
you have one rehearsal?
Short rehearsal. So
Yeah.
in the morning, the schedule was very simple. The show goes live to air at midday. Rehearsal started at 10 from memory. We had three live to air performers each day. So usually if they're self-contained, that's a band set up in their own right. But usually there were 3 singers working with the Jeff Harvey band, so they get half an hour each.
Right.
That's it.
That's it.
Half
yeah.
an hour. You've
Yeah.
got half an
Obviously
hour.
the band had
Band
already
nailed
got their stuff completely down. It's just a matter of
The
working
band would
together
never
and-
rehearse the songs until that day, because they were doing the same thing yesterday and the day before that.
Right.
So at 9 o'clock in the morning, the band would come in, and 9:30, maybe 9:30, I think. And Jeff would just run them through. Okay, so today we have Peter Couples doing "Isn't She Lovely" in the key of C.
Yeah.
And then they'd run that, and then okay, next, and they would just literally run the charts without the singer.
Wow.
The singer would come in. The first singer would come in at 10 o'clock, and they
Yeah.
go 3, 4, go. They would do 3 runs maximum. If they didn't cut it, bad luck, baby. Better get it together before you go live to air. Because 10:30, sorry, next, boom,
Yeah.
let them in. Now the Americans and the tour managers and the promoters were just apoplectic at this, because they never, even Johnny
Doesn't
Carson
happen.
and all that stuff, they don't.
Yeah.
It just never happened. Back in the 60s, 50s and 60s, yeah, Dean Martin and Sammy Davis and all that stuff, they would do it live, but not in the 80s. It wasn't
Yeah,
happening.
right.
It was nowhere in the world that was doing 15 live to air music spots a week.
How amazing.
So it was, and that's what we were saying. We'd be sitting in the studio going, "This is amazing."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get to do it tomorrow.
Which are the interesting artists, the really interesting ones that stood out for positive or negative reasons? Artists that we would know.
Tommy Emmanuel, as I said, has been a long time friend, and I've known Tommy since way before he was successful as a musician. He's now performing around the world, and I have great memories of getting him onto television, live television for the first time. and so I put him on the Midday Show, and there was resistance because people didn't know who he was, and maybe they thought he was just my friend, but he's extraordinary talent.
Gosh,
And-
everyone knows that now, surely.
And this was the
Yeah.
thing was, anyway, so Tommy was, turning up every time he was in Sydney, and we'd have him on the Midday Show, and he'd play, and Ray Martin would interview him and all the rest of it. He could never get on any other show until eventually his management tried for like a year to get him onto Hey Hey at Saturday.
Right.
And they just kept saying, no, he doesn't sing it.
Aw.
We don't want just a guitar player. We've got guitar players. That's not going to work.
Yeah.
Even though he'd been going down great guns and all the rest of it with the daytime audience. And finally, somehow, someone twisted Daryl's arm, Daryl Summers here, the host of Hey Hey, and Tommy was one of the biggest stars they ever had on that show. He was a regular, and I like to think I helped a little bit in that.
Sounds like you helped a lot, yeah.
Yes.
So what does music mean to you?
Oh God, it's the reason music was a big part of my life when I was a kid. My mum was an opera singer, and made me go to the choir at church and do all that sort of stuff. But I discovered this group called the Beatles when I was
The Beatles, yeah, I think I've heard of them. Yeah.
when I was probably about 9. My grandparents gave me a transistor radio when I was 9 years old. They'd been to Japan. It was the only place you could buy one
Oh,
back in the early 60s.
yeah.
And I lived with that little earphone thing in my, every night. And all of a sudden, the world of music was, as a really young kid. And then I heard this group called the Beatles, and I went, "What's that?" And I just kind of went, "Whoa, hang on." And then it became the Rolling Stones and the Animals and the Who and God knows and everything else. So I was just totally transfixed by it. So, you do school and you do your fun and your sport and your everything else and all the rest of it. But I've been playing in bands since I was 12 years old.
Right. So there was never any other career path that you were thinking of?
No, yeah, I'd actually, the same story going back to the early days. Straight out of high school, I actually studied to become a teacher, and I did actually teach primary school and high school music.
It was still music.
It was still music.
Yeah.
And I got lucky with I did with the music thing, because I actually was trained as a primary school teacher, which I knew I was never really going to be very good at and probably hang around too long at. But early in even my first year of teaching, the principal came in and said, "Oh, I hear you play the guitar, son." I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Oh, well, the high school, this is a country school we're talking about here, where the high school and the junior school are all together. High school hasn't had a music teacher for like 6 years. Do you want to be it?" So half of my face-to-face teaching time was actually teaching high school music without any qualifications whatsoever. And I said, I can't read music, and I certainly don't know enough theory to teach that. When it doesn't matter, just teach them to enjoy it. That was the brief.
What a lovely
That's right.
attitude. Yeah.
So for most of my teaching time, I was actually, very luckily allowed to be teaching music.
So the stuff that I've heard from you tonight, then there seems to be a lot of lucky things that have happened, but at the same time, the TV thing, you worked really hard.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because you were working really hard behind the scenes and prepared that the luck kind of happened?
Yeah, I think you make your own luck. In many cases, that's been the way. I've always been lucky, is the word, where if I knew what I wanted, I can sort of just really narrow that focus down and kind of go for it. And that's, I think it's really challenging. So I've got adult children, and as they were growing up, I kept saying the hardest thing to do is actually nail down what it is you want to do.
Definitely, and we're lucky because I feel the same way, that I always knew what I wanted to do, and a lot of people don't.
Correct. If you've got a real passion for something and you can find a way to make that work to make a living, it's that focus is kind of easy.
And people say, I'm sure they do to you, because they do to me, you're so lucky to do something that you love. And yes, I do feel lucky, but at the same time, it's not as if it just kind of fell in my lap.
No, it's not all luck.
No.
No, well, making any sort of living out of music has never been harder.
Yeah.
So
You think that? It's harder, never been harder than now?
Yeah.
Even though you were saying it was still hard in the 80s. Because we think of the 80s as the golden period where there were live bands on every street corner, and there were comparatively, but it still was hard to make money.
Yeah, I was looking back at the musicians that were working full time then, and there was an awful lot more of them.
Right.
High level players working, many nights a week and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But you have to, put it in context, is that a lot of those guys, for example, if they were in the Jeff Harvey band and reading music and working with overseas artists at the highest level, on Friday night they're playing some little jazz gig for about $60 somewhere, because that's the music they love.
Yeah.
So my view is that the the top 10% of the big artists in the world make about 90% of the money.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And the rest of the hard-working musicians that really have to work hard, have to work really hard to make a living.
Yeah. But we wouldn't have it any other way.
No.
Well, we might want to be the 10%, but
We
apart
would-
from that, we still want to
would.
be in this.
That's right. But you see, I sort of took a left turn somewhere because I kind of made it easier on myself with the decision to not have to rely on being a player.
Yeah.
But at the same token, I knew I had to work really hard to find a way to still work in music that was actually going to pay me a living wage. And when I saw the television window open, that was the window that helped me enormously. It's very hard to maintain a long career in media, and particularly, you're not if you seem to be too old, you're not seen to be cutting edge. You're not you're not the hip guy anymore. So what was happening was that I would be quietly saying, thanks very much, long service leave, see you later, and we bring in the new hip crew. And this happened for a few years. And the new production team would come in and maybe things didn't quite work out the way they planned or whatever else, and the phone calls that I was then getting 2 years later was like,
Please come back.
yeah, did happen a lot.
I bet it
Can
did.
you come back and fix it? And I kind of go, well, that's a bit like being a dentist. It's just fixing things.
Yeah, right.
No one really
That's
likes
not what I
going
wanted
to the
to do.
dentist.
Yeah.
So I started my little new venture called Premier Guitars because I wanted to stay connected to the music community, and the production work was becoming a little bit pulling teeth, like I was saying.
Yeah.
And there was a little gap in the market for a boutique business that connects sellers with buyers of high-end, great guitars and amps and stuff like that. So now I'm having it supposed to be my semi-retirement part-time job, which has now taken over my life.
Of course it has.
Along with still playing in bands.
Yeah,
So
which is wonderful. Well, we have a sound check to get to, so thank you so much for talking to me.
Amanda?
Truth will show when you stand so close, eye to eye.
Thank you so much for joining me. Have a look out on YouTube if you want to press the subscribe button. I'm sure that means it'll tell you when a new video's up, but there should be one every couple of weeks. And I've also put a few links below if you want to check out any music or some other stuff, or leave me a message. See you later. See you next time.
But I'll be watching you.